Meltdown. Thanks so much for joining me for this Thursday. I'm so excited to have you guys join me. Hey, coming up later on today, I've got your chance to score that virtual meet and greet with Gavin Rosdale and Bush before they take to the stage July 18th for their live stream concert. We'll tell you more about that coming up here in a bit. As Jade was talking about a little while ago, 4Play4 is bands that have had somebody else, I should say songs, that had some bands collaborate with them. And, of course, the Hard Drive at 5 coming up here in just a bit. Hey everyone, it's Meltdown, and I'm here to tell you that voting is cool. You can check out my Hard Drive at 5 on the ride home and vote for whatever songs you want to hear at 5 o'clock. And the best thing about this is there's no long lines at the voting booth. There's no mail-in ballots. I mean, you can vote early and vote often. Plus, there's no stupid jokes at the voting booth. Hey, who used all the shampoo? I'm voting. Plus, you can vote anywhere, at any time. Hang on for a minute. I'm trying to vote. All right, guys, it's real simple to vote. Just go to WRIF.com. You can vote up the songs you like, vote down the songs you don't like. It's the Hard Drive at 5, weekdays at 5 o'clock, right here on WRIF.
Welcome to episode 20 of the Media's Input. I am your host, James A. Paxson. To check out this interview and previous interviews, go to my YouTube channel, James Paxson. Episode 19 was with Audley Stevenson, who is the Deputy Commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada. Today we have, probably in my opinion, one of the best rock DJs in Detroit radio history. He is on 3 to 7 on 101 The Riff. He has the Talkin' Rock podcast. It is Meltdown. How are we doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I guess I'm no match to the guy from Canada with basketball. I didn't even know there was a Canadian basketball league. Is there?
Yes, there is a National Basketball League of Canada. There is a team called the Windsor Express in Windsor. And I had the pleasure of talking to the play-by-play broadcaster, Aaron Sanders, for the Express. And he was like, the commissioner wants to come on your show. And I'm like, I don't know why, but absolutely, I'll have him on my show.
Hey, why not? Like we were talking about before you started recording, it's like, get out there and put yourself out there. I remember one time I used to do these junkets to Los Angeles around the Grammys. And I'll never forget, somebody said, the guy that was like kind of putting the whole thing together, he said, hey, listen, interview bands or artists that you might not be all that familiar with because you never know what's going to happen. And I've kind of lived my life that way too. There's been some interviews, like I just interviewed Michael McDonald from the Doobie Brothers last year. I don't know if I've ever played a Doobie Brothers song on the radio, but it's like, I'll give this a shot. And he was great. It's like, a lot of these people are super nice and they're willing to talk about stuff. And, he was a little thrown off by the name Meltdown. He really didn't know where that was coming from, but he was nice. So yeah, you got to put yourself out there, like we were talking about before, and get in front of people and talk to different kinds of people. So
you have one of the coolest setups I've ever seen, to just have a Zoom video call or anything. Like all those pictures and the records behind you, that is one of the coolest setups I've ever seen.
Oh, I was going to say records. I was going to say I'm looking at about 400 of them here. You're talking about those. Yeah, this is my rock room that goes, like that. So I like, it's like, it's my rock room. So this is like Dad's place. I built this years ago when I moved into this house, and I got my workout stuff over there. I got my studio and my pool table over there, my records and my turntable. And this is kind of like my area. So.
Well, I first noticed it, to be fair. You moved your head a little bit and I was like, oh my God, the Shinedown record. Cause I'm a huge Shinedown fan. Oh my gosh, they are so awesome.
They gave that to me years ago. Brent Smith, I've known since about 2003, since they kind of started, and the record company emailed me one day, and they're like, "Hey, what's your address?" And I'm like, "Okay, is this a real record company?" And so I emailed him back jokingly. I said, "Hey, what's this for? LOL or whatever." Hey, Brent wants to send you something, and he sent me this gold record. So it was really nice of him, and he's always been really thoughtful like that. So.
Yeah, I really got into him because someone sent me a cover of Simple Man. And I was like, who are these guys? Because, I love Skynyrd, but I may have liked the song better by Shinedown. So that's when I got really into him.
Well, Jason, the original guitar player, who's still a good friend of mine, his ex-wife was one of the daughters from one of the guys from Skynyrd.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, Shinedown's from, Jacksonville, which is where Skynyrd's from. So it's all one big circle.
Yes, it's all one big small circle. That's for sure. Talk to me about, the beginning stages for you, your educational or professional history, how you started, where you've been, how you got to here now.
Well, I started 30 years ago in Buffalo, where I grew up. And it was September 28th, 1989. I got hired to do board op. You're familiar with board op. We were just talking about that. And the guy who hired me was a legendary morning radio show host in Buffalo. And so I was pretty excited about that. But what happened was I made some connections, and it's kind of a long story, but I would work overnights doing custodial stuff, and I'd call the overnight DJ or the morning DJ or whatever that was just coming on, and they'd put me on the air. And one thing led to another, and I made some connections, here and there. And I guess somebody kind of opened the door for me this much. And so when I got hired in September, all I did was pester the FM program director to give me a shot on the air. So I gave him a bunch of tapes, and on February 10th, 1990, 30 years ago, he gave me a shot on the air, and boy, was it bad. It was awful. But, we've improved a little bit since then, I suppose. And here we are. So I worked in Buffalo for about 6 years or so. I lost my job there in 1995, and then I came here. And, I guess the rest is history, so to speak. I came here. I started doing overnights. I got hired to do 2 a.m. to 5:30. After a couple months, somebody left the station, so they switched the times around. So I got bumped to midnight to 5:30. And then another thing happened. We started another station. The 7 to midnight girl went to that station. I went to 7 to midnight. And then when Arthur P. ended his run, I took over for Arthur. So that was 11 years ago. So.
And do you think that was the most embarrassing moment, that first time on air? Or do you have another moment you think about in the beginning of your career that you just felt so embarrassed?
I don't want to get into specifics, but I have introduced band members with wrong names, done stuff like that. There's been some interviews that haven't gone according to plan. Sometimes I'm doing interviews, like, for example, when I'm at Michigan Speedway, I host this big thing. And it's in front of, 5 or 6 or 800 people, whatever. And one of my friends works with some of the drivers. And so I say, hey, tell me a little bit about whatever the driver was. I can't remember who it was. Oh, he loves water sports. So I say, hey, you're a big water sports fan, huh? And he looks at me like, what are you talking about? He had no clue what I was talking about. I'm like, dude, really going to hang me out to dry like that? I've had, Dale Earnhardt one time told me he didn't know what I was talking about when I asked him about his Whiskey River, which kind of annoyed me because that's like something I was just throwing him a softball to give him a chance to talk about his stuff. And he I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, dude, I'm just here to make you look good. Okay. Stuff like that. That kind of thing. Who knows? I've done a lot of dumb things in my life, but we could be here all day talking about that.
What has been some of the most best or successful moments in your career so far?
I don't know. I mean, look, the fact that I'm on WRIF for 25 years, half my life is like, for a guy that never went to college, never spent 1 minute in any sort of school, barely squeaked out of high school. I mean, I go home a couple of times a year and I hang out with some of my friends from high school, and, a lot of them tell me, they go, we can't believe how far you got, because I was never the kid that was going to go far in school. So, I got a picture where I'm standing in front of 40,000 people on stage at Comerica Park before Metallica. That was pretty unreal. And it's funny because like every year, well, with the exception of this year, I suppose, but every year there's something that stands out that you're like, man, I can't believe I'm doing this. I got a chance to, sit on the stage with Tom Morello for an hour and a half a couple of years back. And he told stories, in front of 300 people. I've hosted events that I couldn't believe I was hosting. I've made friends I can't believe I've made. Some people, sometimes I feel like I was just telling someone I kind of feel a little bit ripped off that I didn't get to do and pursue radio in my hometown of Buffalo. But at the same point, I got to experience a lot of things that my friends back home will never get to experience. Becoming friends with a lot of these guys on my wall, that I talk about, and it's like, meeting guys like Kid Rocky and talking about Brent Smith, when they're just starting out. Now we're so far into the business and we've kind of come together, kind of like that. 3 Doors Down. I mean, I just could go on and on about bands I've met in their early stages, and we've kind of just stayed connected, I suppose, and just, kind of grew up together in the business. So, but yeah, definitely doing Afternoon Drive in Detroit is definitely it's a pinnacle. And there were some naysayers, and, I'm the kind of person that likes to prove people wrong. So
I saw this question on Twitter the other day, which I felt perfect for this interview with you. Who is the best live show you've ever seen at the smallest venue?
Well, oh man, I don't know, a live show. I mean, I'll tell you just a couple of off the top of my head. Avatar was amazing when I saw them a couple of years ago. I'd never seen them before, and they were at St. Andrews, and it's not very big, and their stage show, and it's a small stage, and the lights and everything were great. I got to see Stone Temple Pilots 2 weeks after their debut record came out, and there might have been 30 people in the bar. And I thought to myself, this band's pretty good, actually. And they played for about 45 minutes, probably played their whole record, and they jumped off the stage and went right to the bar. And three of the guys actually remembered that specific show. 3 out of the 4 guys. I'll let you guess which 3. But they remember that show. That was pretty cool. I'm sure I'm missing several because we've had Slash do acoustic stuff. I saw Ozzy, in small places. We used to do this thing called the Bud Light blind date, where they would put you on an airplane and fly you to a concert. You know who's going to be taking the stage. Saw Stone Temple Pilots play at the Blues Bar there in Los Angeles. So yeah, that's a pretty good question. I like that question.
Yeah, another one that I've been thinking about a lot, because I didn't get to see many due to my age, concerts at the Palace of Auburn Hills. But I assume you saw some really good acts at the Palace, which was recently torn down.
Yeah, I mean, AC/DC was pretty cool there. I've seen Zombie. We've done a lot of concerts there. There was, that's a shame that place had to come down, because it was so cool. I wish somebody would have bought it and just put concerts in there or events or something. But I mean, it probably wouldn't be a great year for it this year. But yeah, I saw a lot of shows there. Such a great place. What are you going to do? Now it's gone. So.
Yeah, it was the Palace, and it's LCA just doesn't have the same feel to me. I don't want to say it's a bad arena, but I've seen a couple hockey games there, and I'm like, it's just not the same.
Yeah, well, nothing's really going to be the same. You got to give it some time, give it a little bit of time to grow and ferment a little bit, and hopefully down the road we'll all be looking back at the LCA when something new comes along and go, hey, there's some great shows there too. So I've seen great shows there with the 6 Kid Rock shows there, and there would have been a ton this year. I mean, I think Rage Against the Machine was supposed to play there last night, so.
Yeah, the one concert that I'm kind of upset about because of the coronavirus was I was going to see Weezer, Fall Out Boy at Comerica Park, and that one, and Green Day. Yes, you're correct. And now that one's gone, but hopefully we'll get concerts next year.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. It's funny because I don't really, knock on wood, I don't really know anybody that has this. It's like, it seems like it's kind of strange. It's like, but whatever.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I have gotten to know people who have had it, but it's one of those. Hopefully, we can finish out 2020 making the best we can for the virus, so then we can get kind of a normal life back to 2021.
Yeah, no doubt.
Do you think radio-wise you could have continued doing your job with the virus happening 20 years ago, or with the technology, that's how you've been able to do the job now?
Boy. I don't know. I've continued to go to work, so it really hasn't changed much for me. Obviously, I'm not doing appearances like I used to, concerts and different things like that. Some people have been doing their stuff from home. That probably would have been impossible 20 years ago, to some degree. So they would have had to have come in. I don't know. It's with technology and stuff. You can do a lot of stuff. Like I said, I have a studio here. I probably could have done it from there. With just a couple little tweaks here and there. So 20 years ago, probably not. It would have been difficult for sure if you're not going into work every day. And there's still some people out there in radio and stuff that aren't going into work every day, which, like I said, since March, bang, 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 I've been going to work every single day. And I just took my first vacation of the year last week. And it's like, it's 6 months between vacations. And not that I'm crying or complaining, but, even in what I do, you want to try to get out of it sometimes and recharge and get back to it, so.
I can imagine this is a hard question for you, but I asked you to give me your top 3 guitarists ever based on style of play. And I imagine you have a bunch that come to mind, but who are your top 3 ever?
Yeah, there's tons. Well, I think that I'm a big, so I kind of grew up on Ozzy and stuff. So I think that Randy Rhoads, do you know who that is?
Yeah, he passed away in the
airplane crash. Yeah. It's like 1982. Yeah.
Really long fingernails so he could get the strings.
Yeah, so Randy Rhoads, just because of the sheer small amount of work he did, and because of just how many guitar players he influenced. Like you talk to any guitar player, it's almost always about Randy Rhoads in some way, shape, or form. I think Dimebag Darrell to me was so good, and he was such a character, and he was so precise, and he's just so good. And here's one kind of out of left field, but Ron Bumblefoot Dahl is a friend of mine, and he played on Guns N' Roses records, and he's done a bunch of stuff. Now he's with Sons of Apollo. And that guy can play like any song, like any song. It doesn't matter. You just tell him, hey, play this song, and he'll play it. He's like the human jukebox. So he can play any song he wants. So those are three right there. But I mean, there's tons I didn't, that I haven't, that I didn't cover. I mean, obviously the Metallicas and the Tools and the Van Halens and, just tons of great guitar players.
In your opinion, if you had to pick one band or artist, who's the most overrated in rock history?
Yeah, I saw that question. Overrated, man. I don't know. Even when you sent me that question, I couldn't really think of nothing. I think there might be some bands that are more underrated or albums that are underrated. I always thought, like I mentioned, the Guns N' Roses. I thought that their record they put out without Slash and Duff is maybe one of the most underrated records of all time. I think that record's unbelievably good. As far as bands that are overrated, man, I can't really think of none. Listen, every band does their thing. And I don't want to, be a ride on the fence or a cop out or whatever, but every band kind of does their thing. And it's like, if it's not for me, it's not for me. I'm not going to say they're underrated or overrated or whatever, but I don't really have an answer for you. That's like kind of a cop out. I know. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Is there a band or artist that you enjoy listening to that would kind of surprise people? Because you're on the riff, you're the rock metal guy on afternoons. But is there a band that you listen to that you really like that would surprise people?
Well, I kind of like some of the 70s progressive rock. And ever since I got back into vinyl, like Steely Dan and Supertramp and Yes and those kind of bands and Rush, I just love to listen to. I don't know. It's just they're just so good and they're so intricate and they're just, it's like they put out these masterpieces that, that just the thought and like what goes into making these records and just, from everything, all these band members, they're so well schooled and so well versed. And that's, those are kind of the right now 70s progressive rock. And I've been on this kick for a couple of years now. So, and when I go to a record store, I just bought a Yes record the other day. I already have, but I found a nicer, cleaner version of it. So I had to buy that one. So, it's like, so I'll do that. I'll buy records I already have if I find a really good copy of another one. So if I like it a lot,
Do you think the 70s is the best decade for rock, or would you pick 80s, 90s, or 60s?
Man, I'll tell you what, it's so funny because like the 70s is like this classic rock. Then the 80s was all about the hair bands. And the 90s was the grunge. And the 2000s kind of ushered in this everything from Disturbed to Godsmack to the, the Limp Bizkits and the Papa Roaches and the Corns of the world. And then the 2010s came along, and it seems like the 2010s to me are probably going to be more about the straight ahead rock bands with the Greta Van Fleets and the Rival Sons and stuff like that. And, don't forget about the 60s. For me, the 60s was all about the Beatles, and that kind of stuff. So as far as the best era, man, I don't know. I'll tell you this much. In the 70s, though, there were a lot of great rock bands, a lot of great rock musicians. The 80s got a little bit carried away with the hair and all this stuff. But, I mean, like a band like one of my favorites is Cinderella. And it's like you take away the hair and just listen to their music, and they're just a straight ahead, rock blues band that I really like. So I don't know if I can actually pick a decade. I guess if I had to, I don't know. I mean, the 90s is pretty cool because, I love Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and those kind of bands and Nine Inch Nails. They kind of changed the way everything went. But, man, to pick a decade, I don't know. I guess I'd have to go with the Beatles, the 60s. I don't know.
You've seen a lot of live acts, but is there one you haven't seen yet that you need to see?
Yeah, there's probably a lot, but probably bands that I, like for example, like I was just mentioning Steely Dan. I don't know if I'd even want to go see Steely Dan. I just want to put them on the turntable and walk away. I think their live show. I don't know. I've never been to a Steely Dan concert. I was talking about Yes. A couple of the guys are gone now. At least one. Chris Squire's gone, but I'd like to see them. I guess there's probably some bands out there that I haven't seen because members have died or whatever. And it's like I mentioned, Dimebag Darrell. There's a whole generation of kids that never saw Pantera because they haven't played a show in 20 years. And it's like, that's too bad because there's a lot of Pantera fans out there. They'll never get to see them. As far as bands that I haven't seen yet, man, I don't know. I was going to go see the Rolling Stones this year. I'm not a huge Rolling Stones fan, but I got offered up some tickets. And I'm like, okay, I'll go check them out. I never saw them before. And I guess just to check it off my list. I've seen bands like the Grateful Dead and bands like that I'm really not crazy about. But I'm like, I'll go check them out. Just say you saw them. So
when you get offered Stones tickets, you might as well take them because they're like $400 a ticket or something.
Yeah, I can't remember what exactly happened. I think the promoter was doing something about that. So, yeah, I was going to go.
For people who haven't listened to your Talkin' Rock podcast, what episode would you say to listen to get them interested, or maybe as you think your best episode?
It's funny because everybody says, like, what's your favorite interview? And I always say it's my next one because that's kind of the answer. And it is kind of a little bit of a cop-out as well. But I've done some really fun interviews. I guess if you had to listen to one, David Lee Roth from last year, talking to David Lee Roth is like herding cats. And Dave goes off into Dave world, and you got to keep bringing him back. And he goes off into Dave world, you bring him back. And in that episode, he told me that Van Halen, as we know it, is finished. And I posted that interview at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 4 o'clock, it was on rollingstone.com. So that was really exciting. And then I interviewed Slash last year, and out of nowhere, he just offered up the information that they were recording new music, and no one had heard that yet. And that went around the world pretty fast, too. So I guess the Dave one. Here's the thing. Every interview I do, even with lesser-known bands, I always find something interesting about these guys just by talking. And Chris Jericho told me one time years ago. He says, the best part of, or the most important part of interviewing is listening. And if you listen to what they're saying, you can piggyback off of what they're saying. You never know where it's going to go. So it's like driving through the woods. You don't know what you're going to get into. And so, yeah, I guess maybe the David Lee Roth one because it's small, it's short, it's concise, and it made a lot of waves last year.
As a Van Halen fan, would you rather see David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar?
Man, that's I guess that's the question, isn't it? I always, the Dave stuff to me was always heavier and crunchier. I just bought 5150 the other day because I wasn't sure if I had it, and I do have it, but the one I bought's better than the one I had, so I kept that one. But I guess if I was pressured into it, I'd have to go with the Dave stuff just because it's heavier, but I'd love the Sammy Hagar stuff. I've met Sammy Hagar a few times. I've interviewed Sammy Hagar a bunch. He's really nice, and he's like, Sammy Hagar is everything you'd want from like a party buddy. He's really great.
Yeah, it would be a shame if I didn't mention my father during this interview because he's a huge rock fan and he was a huge Van Halen fan. And, probably one of my favorite albums as a kid that he always played was 1984.
Yeah.
With the baby smoking on
Yep.
it. And it was just one of the songs that, I always fell in love with was Hot for Teacher because it was just so cool. And, I didn't hear music like that when I was like 6 or 7. So 2003, 2004, music wasn't like that anymore. And my dad was the hugest Van Halen fan. And he was one of the guys who didn't really like Sammy at all, loved David Lee Roth.
Yeah, you don't find too many of those people out there. That's like the internal question. It's like I could throw that up on my Facebook today and I would get 100 different answers. So, 1984, I do have that record, and I actually couldn't find mine, which bums me out because that's the only record my mother ever bought for me, and she passed away in 1992. But she came home one day, and I'm in the driveway playing hockey, and she's like, "Here's this Van Halen record." I'm like, "Okay," and it was cool, but I don't know why she bought it to this day. Maybe she had a few extra bucks, and she thought I'd like it, so. But that's what I'll always remember from that record. But you talk about Hot for Teacher. It's like Alex Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen. I mean, it's like masterful. Plus, people tend to forget Michael Anthony playing the bass and doing those backups. I mean, what a great band.
Yeah, my dad and I were supposed to see them a couple years ago with Eddie's son playing bass.
Yeah.
And they canceled their tour, of course. So that's one regret I have. I really wanted to see Van Halen live.
Yeah, I saw them live. I saw Dave solo back in the day with a great band with Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan. I mean, just a great, maybe one of the best 80s rock bands ever put together. I saw him, I think, twice on his solo tours, back in the day in the 80s and stuff, but right after leaving Van Halen. So it's still pretty cool. And Dave, like, here's Dave right here. Me and Dave from a billion years ago.
Oh, that's so cool.
But and yeah, and then me and Sammy. But Sammy's so great. He's just such a nice guy.
Yeah, he looks like a real party animal. I'm guessing
Yeah, he
you
is.
have party stories that I won't ask you, but I know
Well, we
you
did some
definitely.
shots of his tequila before that picture was taken. So
I know you're a huge Red Wings fan, and I'm curious what your faith level is in Steve Yzerman. Are you 100% sure he's going to get the team around, or do you have some worries?
well, you can't be 100% sure of anything. I mean, especially now, especially when your team wins 17 games and all of a sudden you get the fourth pick. That's not on Steve. What are you going to do? And I think, listen, I've had the privilege and the pleasure. I played hockey with Steve Yzerman 4 times, once in a charity game and 3 times just in pickup with a bunch of other NHL guys. Nobody was there, in the stands or nothing. And he's a good guy, and you could tell when Steve showed up, the energy level jumped up right away. Like everybody else just put in a little bit more. And I think that Steve takes this job seriously. I think he has a knack for seeing things that the average hockey person might not see. He put a good team together in Tampa. That being said, Steven Stamkos was going to be good, but he found some diamonds in the rough. That being said, they got unceremoniously bounced by an 8th, seed team in 4 games. That should have never happened. So maybe that team was built for the regular season, not for the playoffs. I think, we get the goaltending situation taken care of, a couple solid D-men, and maybe a couple offensive, 20, 25 goal scorers. We got some dead weight on this team.
Yeah, unfortunately with the team, it's one of the worst defenses I ever saw last year. We had some good forwards. I loved the Robbie Fabry transaction. I think he's going to be great here, but you just look at the defense and you go, man, we're not helping our goalies out a lot at all.
No, and the goalies were not. I mean,
They weren't good
well,
either.
Howard was not good. He was awful. And then, Justin Abdelkader tied me in goals in the NHL last year. So,
How many years away do you think the Wings are from playoffs?
Man, that's the question, isn't it? It's like, I'll be optimistic and say 2. We'll see what happens. We've got some good guys, I guess, down in the minors that are fermenting right now. So we'll see what happens,
Is there a hockey team this summer that you're pulling for?
Not really. I don't know how much of it I'm actually going to watch. It's going to be weird. I don't know if I want to watch hockey in August. My son typically plays hockey all year round, so I will watch him through the summer. I will go to Ohio or Cleveland or whatever and watch his tournaments in the middle of summer and put on my sweatshirt and go into a rink, It's going to be a weird thing. I told my wife the other day, it's going to be weird to watch the playoffs, in September or whatever. She's like, well, why? I'm like, she doesn't pay attention, but as far as the team I'm pulling for, I don't know. It was epic when Washington won a couple of years ago. And not only did they win, but the chances of them winning the Stanley Cup in Las Vegas were like, think about that for a second. Nobody wins anything in Las Vegas. Now they got a couple teams out there in the whole thing, right? If you win in Washington or Vancouver or whatever, then go to Vegas. Well, anyone can do that. But to win in Vegas and go there, that is just amazing.
Yeah, I'm a huge sports guy, and my work's in sports, so I don't know how anyone can't love 4 hockey games a day. But I do get your point. It's weird to watch playoff hockey in August, so
listen. I say that now. I'll be watching. Trust me.
Yeah.
But I'll be checking out as much as I can. With the Wings not being in it, I think we got a pretty good core. Larkin and Mantha and Bertuzzi and those kind of guys. Fabry, like you mentioned. I think they're the future. Get a couple guys around them, we'll see what happens. Of course, losing out and getting robbed on that first pick is really a disgrace, and that's a real slap in the face. But
yeah, if there's any team who's ever deserved the first pick in any sport, it was the Red Wings, who won 17 games.
Yeah, getting the fourth pick is it's better than, I suppose, some other picks. But don't forget, Datsuk, Zetterberg, Lindstrom were all picked high rounds. So, really high rounds. I think Zetterberg was like 210th or something. So you find guys, but
right now in rock music, who are some guys who are lesser known or on their first albums who you really like or think are going to be big in the industry?
It's kind of a weird time right now because really nothing's happening right now per se. Avatar just dropped their new record. I'm hoping good things for those guys. Like I said, I really like their show. Bad Flower is a band I kind of like a lot. Rival Sons. I'm really getting into these rock bands like Dirty Honey. I think they were the first ever band to put out their own record or independent label or whatever it was to reach number one. Those guys, have some cool things coming up. Trying to think of some lesser known bands. I don't know. Those are all like real rock bands, not like, they're straight ahead 4 guys. They just go out there and rock. And that's, maybe where it's going right now. But, in the last 6 months, really nothing's really happened. So bands are dropping records here and there, but it's pretty slow.
Are you a full fan of Greta Van Fleet, or do you think they're a copycat of Led Zeppelin?
I like them. I don't think so. I mean, I got their records, here, and I listened to them, and I think, do they sound like Led Zeppelin? Yeah, of course. Are they influenced by Led Zeppelin? For sure. Every band is influenced by something. I'll tell you this much: you go to their show, there's 4 guys playing songs. There's no backing tracks. There's nothing. So, and I haven't seen their live show now in like a year and a half or so. But yeah, they get labeled like that. It's one of those things. It's like, people might say I sound like somebody. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, the Zeppelin thing, I guess, back in the day, Kingdom Come was compared to Zeppelin, and I mean, we'll see what their next record sounds like. If they're doing Stairway to Heaven, then we'll know.
So people can hear you every day, 3 to 7 on the WRIF. Do you have any new podcast episodes coming out?
Right, I don't. I was just thinking about that. I'm going to try to call in some favors from some of my friends. I had Johnny Kelly on a couple weeks ago because I had vacation and stuff, but he was the drummer in Typo Negative, and Peter Steele passed away 10 years ago this year, and we were talking about Typo Negative and different things like that. Right now, it's a little bit slow. I think Rick Emmett from Triumph is going to come on coming up here in the future. Like I said, I might call in some favors to put an episode or 2 out there. I really like putting episodes out. I really like talking to these guys. I think it's interesting. You always learn something. And then to be honest with you, some of the things I really like about doing the podcast is watching them take off. I'll put a podcast out there, and next thing I know, it's on this website or that website or this website, and that's kind of cool. I asked Joe Bonamassa how many guitars he owned, and he said 400. Well, apparently nobody had ever asked him that question before, because that got all over the place. And not like the David Lee Roth thing, but I found that in like weird websites here and there that, guitar magazine websites and stuff. So, but I mentioned Bad Flower, and are you familiar with them at all?
Yeah, I know.
So they have this song Ghost, and it's about the guy, the singer, or whoever you want to, attempting suicide. And he talks about, it talks about his mom and different things like that. And so it's funny what my wife will bring up to me. She'll say, I wonder what his mom thinks about that song. And I'm like, that's an obvious question, right? So I said to him, I don't know, a few months ago, we were doing the Instagram thing. I said to him, I go, what does your mom think about that song? And he goes, you know what? No one's ever asked me that before. And as an interviewer, that's the kind of thing you want people to say. And that was interesting that he had never been asked that before, because they had done tons of interviews and tons of press. And it's like, the whole thing. When a guy says to me, like, I get that question all the time. It's like, I'm like, oh man, I got to think of better questions. But sometimes you got to go there. And sometimes I'll say something like, hey, I know you've been asked this question before, and you never know where it's going to go, because it could be, they could go down a different road. I don't know. So.
Has there been a question yet on the podcast that you've regret asking?
Well, there's one time I regretted a question, and it became like the guy became a really good friend of mine. After Dimebag Darrell was killed in 2004, apparently Phil, the lead singer from Pantera, either wasn't allowed or didn't show up at his funeral. So I interviewed Vinnie Paul in 2006, and he was starting this new band, Hell Yeah, and stuff. And I asked him why Phil wasn't, allowed at the wedding or at the funeral. And VP said, he goes, yeah, well, I don't really want to comment on that. And I'm like, okay. And I just moved on. Well, anyways, when I aired that interview, I actually cut that little section right out. So he called my boss a couple days later, and he's like, hey, why is Meltdown throwing me under the bus, and blah, blah, blah. So I felt really bad about that. And it kind of bothered me a little bit because he's a nice guy, and I kind of felt like, yeah, I'd overstepped my bounds, and I probably shouldn't have. So at the time I was playing hockey with all the NHL guys. This was probably maybe a year or two after the lockout in 04, 05. And I become friends with Nick Lindstrom, and Vinny Paul's a big hockey fan. So I went to Nick's house, and I brought a picture, and I say, hey, can you sign this to Vinny Paul? I know he's in Pantera and stuff. Sure. So he signed it. I framed it. I walked up to his security guards at the show, and I said, hey, I want to give this to Vinny, And so then he came out, and I say, man, listen, I just want to apologize. He's like, for what? I'm like, I kind of overstepped my bounds. And he says, no, man, you're good. And I gave him the picture, and apparently until the day he died, it was in his pool room at his house in Las Vegas, somebody told me. But it's kind of weird how that question, that question kind of was the impetus for us becoming friends. And then he passed away like a week after Las Vegas lost the Stanley Cup. And I remember the last time I texted with him, it was about for an hour after they lost. And it was just texting back and forth, And so that question kind of became, this friendship that we started because I felt bad about it. And I did. I felt bad about it. So
where can people follow you on social media and hear the podcast?
You can follow me at Meltdown WRIF, and I post all my podcasts on there. And at WRIF.com/Meltdown is where you can check out, all my podcasts and stuff. And I think I got links on my Facebook and my Twitter and all that stuff. And of course, just search out Talk and Rock with Meltdown on the on the podcast thing. But yeah, I really like doing the podcast. I think it's fun to get in the minds of these people, especially some of these artists I grew up idolizing. And when I get an email that says, do you want to talk to Alice Cooper? I'm like, is this really happening? Is this for real? I can remember burning out the VCR tape when I was a kid of the show I watched here in Detroit. When I was in Buffalo, I videotaped this MTV concert, and all I did was pause it at the guillotine thing because I wanted to know how he did it. And here he is on the other side of my phone, or and I'm talking to him or whatever. And so that's really exciting for me.
Thank you very much for this interview. To check out this interview and previous interviews of mine, go to the YouTube channel, James Paxton. And as always, thank you to the guest, Meltdown.